Hello, everyone, and welcome back to this episode of Independent Thought. Thank you for sticking with me through the break. I am here with my guest for this week, Karli Hughes. Karli, thank you for coming on Independent Thought today. How are you doing?
Great. How are you?
I'm doing fantastic. I really appreciate you coming on the show today. One of the reasons I asked you to come on today was because I know that you are a real estate agent, and we are seeing some different things in the real estate market right now. I think a lot of people have been interested in this topic across the country, but especially here in Missoula. And I was just hoping that we could talk a little bit about what's going on in the market today. But before we get into any of those questions, I kind of wanted just to ask you a little bit about why you decided to become a real estate agent. Is this something that you've always wanted to do with your life?
Yeah, I would say real estate is something that it was really unavoidable. I grew up in a household and extended family of real estate professionals, whether those individuals were investors, developers, real estate agents, real estate educators, leaders, or property managers. I was exposed to a full spectrum of real estate. And those strong real estate influences over the years eventually shaped my career path towards where I am today. And just a quick backstory. I began working summers at age 11, and these jobs were small, but they taught me discipline and structure from a young age. I started out doing piecework, real estate in a property management and real estate office. I remember all my friends were enjoying activities in the summer. And while I was able to participate in some of those activities, I also had to pass up several to work. And in that moment, I remember resenting my parents for enforcing this structure. But looking back, I know that this regimen ended up being very effective. And it's something that I'll likely introduce to my children. Ultimately, my parents were both working professionals and with a strong work ethic, and they wanted the same for me. So, fast forward to around age 19, I believe I took the property management pre-licensing course for the state of Montana, and I was licensed by age 20. And after obtaining that license, I began working in property management while attending school at the University of Montana. And ultimately, that property management became my life for the next 15 years. During that time frame, I purchased the property management business where I was employed, and I maintained a position of owner, general manager, and property manager. And looking back, I realized that I probably wouldn't have reached such a burnout if I delegated part of my work. But order and control was and still are my weaknesses. In 2016, I'm almost 30 years old, and I have my first child, and my priorities shifted. And I was working, I want to say roughly 60 to 70 hours a week. And as a new mom, I was burning out. I was also beginning to feel that mom guilt, not having enough time with my daughter. And while I knew I wanted to be a working mom because working is really what I wanted to do, I also knew I didn't want it to consume my life as I had allowed it to in the past. My husband approached me and my twin sister approached me. They're both very close to me. They saw my high level of anxiety and stress, and they encouraged me to make a change. So I believe it was late 2017, I found out I was expecting my second child. And in that moment, I had made a commitment to myself to change careers. So I took the real estate licensing class, I believe January 2018, if you're following this timeline. And I was quickly licensed after that. I sold my property management business, and then I transitioned to a real estate agent. And then fearful that I wasn't going to perform to my expectations in the first year of real estate, I also obtained a certification to educate students for property management licensing. And as a bonus, I also became certified to teach trust accounting. But there I was, licensed in real estate, my first year nonetheless, and very pregnant. and risking it all. I put my 15 years in property management and ownership of a small business to rest. And, was starting over worth it? Was it worth the risk to me? I would say 1,000% yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I definitely am always interested in why people choose the career paths that they choose. And the real estate market is something that is a very concerning issue for a lot of people right now. I know that just here locally, the housing market has gotten dramatically expensive. I mean, some people are wondering if they'll ever even be able to buy a home in this community. As somebody who's constantly involved in this space, could you just speak a little bit to why exactly the housing market has become so expensive? And is there a chance that that's going to change anytime soon?
Right. So this is a great question. And it has a quick answer, but of course, an explanation would be helpful. The housing market is expensive because of low inventory and because of high buyer demand. To elaborate on those major driving factors of low inventory, when demand is greater than supply, we end up with what's referred to as a seller's market. People will hear that term, seller's market, buyer's market. So when you have more buyers than you do homes to sell, you are going to end up in a seller's market, which in turn creates this pricing spike. And what we found after the pandemic is everyone was moving within Montana or moving to Montana, but nobody was leaving Montana. Really the only folks, and I mean this in the best way, but the only folks leaving Montana were those going to Jesus. Nobody was leaving. Shortly after the pandemic broke out, we found housing prices escalating on a weekly basis, which was very unprecedented. We hadn't seen this type of shift before. In the past, prices would change by season when we had high season, low season, or they would change on an annual basis, but they weren't changing by the week. They certainly weren't escalating by the week. Real estate agents were having difficulty pricing homes for their clients who were selling homes. And in the same regard, appraisers were also facing an issue trying to find comparable sales with the rapid pricing escalation. So why did we have this low? What factors created this low inventory? And several come to mind, but the top four would be in no particular order. The first would be the low inventory contributor of out-of-state buyers. People are now able to work remotely, and once they were given this freedom to work remotely, we saw a trend of movement more so to the western states. Particularly, I would say at the top of mind, Montana, Idaho, Utah, and Wyoming. These states were all booming with an influx of out-of-state buyers moving in. And buyers were moving out of metropolitan areas, urban areas, and gravitating more to open spaces and smaller communities. And this influx of out-of-state buyers certainly increased buyer demand. Now, a second factor I believe would be attributed to lifestyle. The pandemic changed the way people live and how they want to live. Not only were people wanting a change of residence after being locked down in their homes, they were wanting an entirely different atmosphere. So for example, I helped some families move to Montana and they were looking for like a compound-like setting. They wanted their parents there, their in-laws, aunts and uncles, and all the extended family members. And compound living was becoming far more common than I'd ever seen it before. Also, we found people who wanted to be more self-sufficient and they wanted to learn to live entirely off their land. And these buyer behavior shifts in the past 2 years were also unprecedented. So, we were all having to adapt. And these lifestyle changes ultimately added to an activity spike in our buyer pool. With all of these new lifestyles people were picking up, Montana was a perfect place for these new lifestyles people wanted to adapt. And then, the third factor I would say, and this is just a very short note on this, because it's such a it's a very detailed topic, but the short answer would be that the foreclosure moratorium also added to this issue of low inventory because we had no foreclosures. There were no foreclosures to offer people, which is something we'd also never seen before. There's always been foreclosed properties that we can offer to buyers, and that just wasn't the case. And then lastly, of these major factors that contributed to low inventory and a high buyer spike was a significant slowdown in new construction. So whether it was labor and material shortages and or factory shutdowns, new construction wasn't moving like it was prior to the pandemic. All of these elements drove construction costs up over and above the cost per square foot of any existing home. So while existing homes were outrageous in price, the cost to build a home was even more than that. So, we were left with, if we had a client build a home, we had to give them the harsh reality of, yes, here's a piece of land and you can build a home here, but it is going to be more than an existing home, which is already really difficult to find, and it is already very expensive. So, overall, this lack of inventory and high demand of buyers was and still is the cause of our expensive housing prices. And I've recently noticed a small, and I mean a very small reprieve in this high buyer activity. And we have seen more homes come on the market, but it's still very much a seller's market. And when I say a small reprieve, I'm talking, we'd see a home that was popular among buyers and you would see 20 to 30 offers when in the craze of all of this. And now we're looking at maybe 5 to 10 offers. So still very competitive and still very much a seller's market.
Yeah. So I appreciate you illuminating this a little bit and kind of adding some context to, this issue, because I don't think that as far as the ins and outs, the particulars of why the market has become so expensive is truly common knowledge. I mean, I'm sure it is to people inside the industry, but to the everyday person, we just see the housing market go up. We don't always know exactly the reasons why it's happening. One of the things that I was interested about, because I had heard some speculation on this, was that one of the reasons that the housing market was in fact going up was because, again, there was less inventory. And part of that was due to the fact of the rise in Airbnbs. There was just more and more of these properties in every community. And because of that, there's just less places for people to live. In your experience, have you seen Airbnbs being a problem for the market at all?
Okay, so, when we say Airbnbs, just to, bring some clarity to this, we're talking about vacation or short-term rentals. And they've been dubbed Airbnbs because there's a popular app, Airbnb, and that's where you find these short-term or vacation rentals. You can also find them on VRBO, and there's other platforms now. And do I feel like they're problematic? I guess my short answer, especially for Missoulians, is no. And, I understand some are going to argue that Airbnbs or short-term rentals in a market with a near 0% vacancy rate for renters is only compounding the lack of housing. Well, I can certainly see how from a surface point of view, someone might feel that this is problematic. However, I'd like to kind of break this down a little bit because that's like I said, it's a very surface point of view. So Airbnbs, for those who aren't aware, are required to register with the city of Missoula. And while you may have a handful of those who don't abide by those registration rules, you'll find most are compliant and have registered with the city of Missoula. So having said that, we have approximately 300 Airbnbs registered with the city of Missoula. And these Airbnbs belong to small mom and pop operations or small investors of maybe 1 to 3 rental homes. And they're intended as a nest egg or, a long-term retirement plan. These by no means, and it is extremely rare, especially that I've seen here in Missoula, is for a large investor to come throw up a big complex and have them all be short-term rental units. So that said, I personally have clients who have vacation rentals or Airbnbs. And a lot of them, what I'm finding, because we have such an expensive market, have to purchase homes and house hack them. So what I mean by that is they're purchasing a house and they're converting this home into a duplex or a triplex, and the homeowner, lives in one unit and rents the adjoining units. And Airbnbs are gaining popularity among landlords who are neighbors of their own rental units. And the biggest reason is because they don't have neighbors year round, but they're still able to meet a fiscal bottom line. And it's important to note that most, if not all, as I mentioned before, large scale investors in Missoula are building upwards of 100 to 500 units at a time, intended solely for long-term renters. So this brings me to another point, and everybody's going to have their opinion, but the fact is that, I think when we make Airbnbs out to be the culprit for decreased vacancy rates in Missoula, we're looking in the wrong place. Where I really think we're going to resolve this issue is with the city's rezoning approval process. So for example, recently, a major investor applied to build approximately 700 units in Missoula. And the city approved roughly 400 of the units, and then they denied the remaining 300. This denial came after this investor had already passed all the testing requirements to obtain full city approval. And it's mind-blowing to think that just that one rezone alone by the city for an additional 300 units could have replaced the 300 registered Airbnbs in Missoula. And aside from the issue, aside from issues with general contractors are facing with building expenses for large scale projects like the one just described, I feel like our city may have, be a little bit to blame for this lack of rental housing in Missoula. We have the investors, but we need the rezoning approval where it's warranted.
Okay. And so I do know that adding construction, across the city and across the area is definitely a top priority for many, as a way to fix this housing crisis. And while we are waiting for, more housing to become available, there are a lot of first-time buyers that are trying to figure out what exactly they should do in the meantime. I mean, obviously, saving up for the house is the most important thing, whatever your finances currently are. But, you work with first-time buyers all the time. Is there anything in particular that you would say to potential first-time buyers as like advice to help them get ready while they're, waiting for the market to kind of cool off a little bit?
Yes, I think this is a great question because a lot of people don't know where to start. And, by the time you're actually ready to take step one, you've probably viewed a million homes on Zillow or Trulia or Realtor.com, and you're motivated and you're ready for action, but you don't know where to go. So what I'll say is you're first going to want to meet with a lender. And I highly recommend you meet with a local lender. And if you want to know why I advocate for local lenders, you can carve out an hour of your time and give me a call. If you're looking for lender recommendations, it's best to reach out to a real estate professional. And when I say that, I mean real estate agent for those recommendations. They're going to know the best people in which to refer your way. Your lender will review your current financial snapshot and help you get to the finish line. And at that time, you may or may not be prepared to buy a home, but that lender is going to help you establish goals to get there. So, a lot of people miss this step first, but what I'll say is in a competitive market, it's nearly impossible to win a bid on a home without first being pre-approved by a lender. So that is first and foremost what you need to do to get started. And once you've received that pre-approval letter from a lender, then begin your search for a real estate professional. And, I recommend people interview real estate agents to help you find someone who jives well with your personality and your goals. Even the most seasoned and reputable agent is not for everybody. You'll likely be spending a good amount of time with this person. So it's important to work with someone who's going to work well with you. Next, gosh, I mean, you'll start searching for properties at that point, and your real estate agent will know what you're searching for and can send you listings as soon as they come available. That's a really big perk working with a real estate agent, is them being able to shoot off in a text or an email, a new property as it comes available, so that you have it right away and you're able to compete with everybody else. It's a very important step in a fast moving market. Otherwise, by the time it populates on your Zillow app, it's probably too late. And so, I mean, ultimately, your lender and real estate agent are going to be working closely with you until you find and secure a home. Your real estate agent's going to be showing you homes, placing competitive offers, engaging in negotiations, educating and helping you through the contingencies, and then celebrating with you when you're at closing for your first home. And of course, this is a grossly concise version of what actually takes place during a transaction, but it illustrates somewhat of a general outline. One strong piece of advice that I will leave you with is that, especially for first-time home buyers, but all buyers really, is to communicate. And so ask all the questions. There are no insignificant questions. I personally love to educate my buyers, and I welcome questions with open arms. And I'd rather have my clients have clarity and make educated decisions based on that clarity, rather than to just go with the motions and trust everything that their agent is doing.
Significant is definitely an important word here, because I think, someone in your particular position right now, that is a very significant position to be in, because there is a lot of trepidation around, buying a home, especially with the amount of money that we're talking about. People are making life-altering decisions. And due to that fact, people are going to be balls of stress. I'm sure that there's going to be a lot of tense conversations, depending on someone's financial status, and a lot of uncertainty. And I'm sure that's a lot of emotions to juggle, being a real estate agent. So why do you personally like the experience of helping people buy and sell their homes? Like, what is it particularly about this field that, just drew you to wanting to do this for the rest of your life?
Sure. So, one thing is that I appreciate that this career is not mundane. I'm consistently being challenged as the industry evolves, and I get to work with some of the most fascinating people. All very different in personality, and each with their unique story. My clients are really what makes it worth it. I love the relationship aspect of real estate. And while some agents might love those cash, quick close, slam dunk deals, I've done those and I've walked away with a sense of emptiness. And I realized that while I'm grateful that my client had such an effortless purchase, in the same regard, I feel like I didn't get to establish that quality relationship I create with clients who I work with for a longer period of time. So I love the relationship aspect. And of course, I love real estate. So, homes tell a compelling story, and each in a respective way. And I admire, the original character and creativity that comes with home design and interiors. Whether it's a mansion or a tiny home, they all encompass a unique flair. And I live for that variety of originality. At the end of the day, real estate's what I've known and I've studied from a very young age. And I don't see that changing. I really value what I do, and I find great satisfaction in successfully helping my clients meet their real estate goals.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Karli. I really do appreciate you coming on with us today and talking about, the different ins and outs of the market, and, why it is that you are involved in it. Again, this is a conversation that I feel as though definitely needs to be had a lot more, because, it's a very important piece of American culture, is buying a home. And so I do appreciate you coming on and kind of talking to us about it a little bit today. For those who are interested, where could people find you online if they want to get in touch with you?
Sure. People can find me on Instagram, Facebook, or I do have a website, which is my first and last name, KarliHughes.com.
Perfect. And for those who are interested, I'll have links to those. I'll have links in the description of this episode. So go ahead and just click on the description of this episode and you'll see some links underneath, and you'll be able to get in contact with Karli if you would like. Karli, thank you so much for coming on to the podcast today. I truly appreciate it.
Thanks, Desmond.
Thank you. And to thank all my listeners for sticking with us, we're going to take one final break and we'll be right back after some thoughts.